encourage folks to be ready to do that. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for attending our Careers in History panel. The History Department has been working with XPD, or Career Services prior to XPD's name, for quite a while now, and it's been very rewarding, both for the sake of having students return, this time virtually, and for the advice and insights that they can give to current students. So I'm very happy to be sort of at the nexus of this, to get to see past students and work with current students. And Dr. Jonathan Nash is also in the room. Our students from History 142 and History 295 are present in the room, and those are two classes for which we cooperate pretty closely with XPD. I'd like to welcome our four panelists, our alumni and alumni, and I'll introduce them by name briefly, and then we'll have some questions for them to identify themselves and get us started. And for the students in the room, I would encourage you to have some questions at the end. I know Dr. Nash's students had prepared some that they had worked on Canvas, I believe. Right. So our four panelists are Sarah Bakken, graduated in 2016, Connor Beck, graduated in 2015, Lucas Bellflower, also in 2016, and Sarah Hawkins in 2009. So they're all graduated within a decade, a little over a decade. So they're relatively recent, but long graduated far enough back so that they're somewhat established in their careers, even though those careers might change a little bit in the future. So we'll start off with just sort of a basic identification question, and to get us in the mood for history. So I'd like to ask our panelists to give a brief introduction to their own history, in which they explain why they majored in history and their paths to their current jobs. And we'll talk about specific skills and how you use your degree in the next segment. So I'm just going to go in order of the listing, if that's okay, and ask for Sarah Bakken to start us off.
Hi, everyone. So I'm starting with my own history first, right? Just that. Okay. So hi, everyone. My name's Sarah Bakken. History was always my favorite subject in school, in high school. But going into college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. In my mind, I thought I wanted to be a nurse, but I took my first bio class and dropped it after the second one and decided, nope, I hate science. That's not going to work for me. So I ended up going into my first semester thinking I was going to be an English major. I was in an English class. I enjoyed it. English was also one of my favorite subjects in school. I thought, I know people who are English majors, they can get a job doing that. But then my second semester, I took a history class because I loved history, and it was with Dr. Schroeder. And then I remember attending one of the events that the history department put on in Mary Commons about what can you do with a history major? And Dr. Schroeder was like, I think you should be a history major. And I agreed with him. So then I changed my major. And I'm really glad I did, because I knew in the back of my mind that I enjoyed history the most. And it made it into, by choosing to be a history major, I was really able to enjoy the classes I took. And yeah, that's kind of how I ended up where I was.
And then Sarah, could you just give us a brief accounting of how you got from graduation to where you are now professionally?
Sure. So after while I was attending St. Ben's, I worked at Clemens Library from freshman year till senior year. Go library. You should use it if you don't already as a student there. So I really enjoyed working in the library, and as you guys know, you will end up doing like a history, I think you still do that, the history thesis your senior year. So as I was doing that history thesis, and just as a history major, each class required me to do a lot of research for our papers and things we had to do. And so I really liked that aspect of my classes. I didn't love the writing part so much, but I really enjoyed doing the research for it. And so I started to think about how could I use that in my career. And then it kind of just lined up with being a librarian. As I worked at the library, I thought, that's a way I could use this skill. So after graduation, I applied to library science programs. The degree I have is called a Master of Library and Information Science. And I went to UW-Madison. And it was a 2-year program. If you do it full time, that's what I did. And that's how I ended up where I was. I did a lot of different internships and different kinds of library jobs while in school to kind of figure out what path of librarianship I wanted to do, because there are so many: public library, medical librarian, metadata librarian. But currently I am a research and instruction librarian at UW Green Bay in Wisconsin. So it's similar to the librarians that you see on your campus. So I kind of have the same job as they do.
Great, thank you very much. Our next one on the list here is Connor Beck. So if you could tell us a little bit about your decision to be a history major and the path that got you to where you are now.
Sure thing. Picture books as a kid. That's really where it all started. I mean, I loved history growing up. You know, it had the best stories. It was captivating, engaging for me, I think just naturally. But by the time I started thinking about college, I was really thinking about law school. And I knew that a lot of history majors went on to law school. And so I thought, okay, this is something that capitalizes on my interests, my natural skills. I did really well at history in high school. I'm going to go for it. And long story short, I did not end up pursuing law, but I stuck with my history major. And that was a great decision, even though I changed plans. So after graduating from college, I took a year off to kind of think about what I wanted to do next. I traveled to Ireland a little bit, and then I became a Jesuit volunteer. I had 2 years of service in Washington State as a JV and a AmeriCorps member. And when I moved back home, my sister got me interested in pursuing marketing and advertising. And luckily I had some experience during college where I wrote for a small business that a few students were running on campus. And so I thought, okay, history taught me all about writing and communicating effectively, and I can use those skills to get into marketing and advertising, and it's been really great. That's my story.
Well, thank you, Connor. See, in your case just shows that even if you stray with the Jesuits, you can still come back on the right path.
Yeah, well done, Dr. Well done.
Our next guest is panelist is Lucas Bellflower. So Lucas, if you would do the same, tell us a little bit about why you majored in history and give us a brief overview of your path to where you find yourself now.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Dr. Schroeder, to Angie, and to Dr. Nash for putting this on. It's a cool event. So I guess, as Connor alluded to, I mean, I had also heard that history majors went on to law school quite often, or fairly often, I guess. And that was something I did always have some interest in. So that was one reason. Second reason, my grandfather taught high school history, so he kind of encouraged me in that regard. And then finally, I guess I just always loved the subject. It was always my favorite growing up. As far as getting to where I am today, I guess my path was fairly linear, as in I went right to law school out of undergrad. I knew if I took a break, I wouldn't be able to go back. So a gap year wasn't for me. So I pushed through and then got my first job. And now I'm on my second job, and here I am.
All right, thank you very much. And then Sarah Hawkins, I think you know the shtick by now.
I got it. Thank you. Yeah, so similar story to me in terms of how history major came to be my chosen major. I had always loved history. My dad is a history buff. And so from a young age, you know, a lot of our family vacations were things like traveling to national parks or state parks and just really like public history and investigating the impact it had on our world today. And I had taken AP history in school, so it gave me, you know, a leg up on credits right away entering St. Ben's. But really what I wanted to do with it, I had no idea. I knew that I did not want to be a teacher. That was like my only, I know this isn't for me. and I'll figure out what's practical once I get to school. I had started working in libraries at age 16 and knew I loved them, but hadn't really seen it as a career until actually I started on campus. I worked in interlibrary loan at Alquin, and it took me about 2 weeks to realize, oh, this isn't just that I loved my old library job, but like I love this library job too. And there's a trend and I love libraries in general. So it quickly, like before a month into my first semester at school, I realized, okay, this history degree is going to be a practical stepping stone for me to go on to get my master's in library science. So like Sarah, I graduated and went on and got my master's in library and information science. I did my program online at Drexel University while I stayed in the area and worked at Great River Regional Library, St. Cloud State, and also stayed working at Clemens and Alquin for a while I pursued my degree. So I was able to continue the practical working experience while doing my degree online. After graduation, I went to East Central Regional Library and started working in public libraries here in Minnesota. Worked for about 9 years in rural Minnesota Regional Library Service before 2019 moving to MELSA, the Metropolitan Library Services Agency, which is the regional public library system that serves the 7-county metro. And I'm working as a project manager for them. So as a librarian and project manager, making sure that we provide quality regional public library services across the 7-county metro. And that's where I am today.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Just a note for the students in the room, you will have heard that our panelists talked about why they were interested in history and how they decided to major. They also talked a little bit about volunteer opportunities after graduation or specific training and degree work. So those are the sorts of things you might want to keep in mind as you ponder potential questions. The next question I have for the panelists is about how you have made your history degree practical in your career. There's a lot of discussion, of course, these days and for quite a while about skills that we learn at liberal arts institutions, or specifically historians in our case. And so we're wondering if you could tell us how your history degree prepared you to work in the field that you have now, and how are you able to use your skills and knowledge acquired from the history major in your present work? And we'll go through the same order. And let's see. Sarah might be busy right now, so let's go to Connor first.
Yeah, I know probably everyone else is thinking this, and I mentioned it before too, so I don't want to steal anyone's answer, but the writing skills for sure, right? So it's you're learning how to communicate effectively in written word, and then through the occasional presentation. I'll let the librarians and Lucas speak about the research part. I'll just talk about the writing part and how that's been really useful for me, even though the research aspect of my history background has been really helpful too. There's a lot of research that goes on in marketing and advertising. If you want to communicate value to people, you have to know what their problems are. You have to know what type of value they're interested in the first place. And that begins with research. And then of course, writing history, writing essays is a lot different than communicating in a marketing and advertising setting. But I think the point remains, you need to try and connect with people and communicate information. And if you can, in a really simple, straightforward way that connects and makes a point. So I always feel like my history major really benefited me in that way. You, I think, also learn how to think creatively and how to build an argument, which is really good for me too as a marketer as well. I got to just take these different points of data and come up with a way to kind of think outside the box and connect with people. And when you're writing as a historian, you're doing just that. You're trying to make an argument that's going to connect with people in a way that sticks and makes an impact and influences behavior or thoughts. So again, pretty direct connections there. And I'm grateful I have that history background for those reasons. How's that, Dr. Schroeder?
Perfect. Thank you very much,
Yeah,
Connor.
you're welcome.
We might have
You're
some
welcome.
follow-ups for you.
Oh, for sure.
Sarah Bakken, well, why don't we go to you? You're back now. Here's the prompt. I know that you were gone for just a little bit. This question is about how you use how your history degree has been useful in your current career, and so maybe more specifically, how you use the skills and knowledge that you gained as a history major in the work that you do now.
Okay, thank you. I hope I don't repeat anything Connor said. I had to step out for a second. But I would say most obviously, definitely being a research librarian, all the research skills that I learned from being a history major definitely have been the most useful, especially the senior thesis that we did in that last semester. It was so hard and so grueling, but it was definitely the most rewarding project I did. And I use it as an example in my work all the time with my students doing research. So, those skills definitely, but I also think about being a research librarian, and I'm the liaison at my school for like the history, English, more the humanities students. But I also do help a lot of students in different areas like science and philosophy and all those different things. So my job requires me to be very multidisciplinary. And I think studying history is very multidisciplinary, and it kind of helped me work in that way. Because if you think about different things about history while you're studying, the French Revolution, you could also be like focusing on like women and gender studies at the same time, or things related to science or whatever. So that's been really, really helpful. And also all those papers that I dreaded writing definitely made me a stronger writer for sure. And no matter what career you're in, I think you're going to be using writing skills. And I think it's really important to help build those communication skills and feel more confident in that. So the work seems hard now, but you'll be happy you learned how to do it in college for sure.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. Lucas, could you address the question of how you use your history degree has benefited you in your current job, how you use the skills and knowledges acquired in your history work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with everything Connor and Sarah said. The writing skills and oral communication skills are fantastic that you learn in your history courses. It prepared me for law school, because law school is essentially all reading and writing. So I was well prepared that way. As far as my daily job, I read and write also, like all day, every day, pretty much. The practice of law is different than law school for a variety of reasons, which I could touch on later, but ultimately the ability to analyze and organize evidence, the ability to interpret events, just every skill you learn in those classes are useful. It's helped me markedly.
Thank you, Lucas. And Sarah Hawkins, if you could tell us about using your history degree and skills and knowledge acquired thereby.
Yeah, so I would also echo everything that everyone has already said. But in addition to that, I think really for me, the history major it helped me understand and give some insight into the human condition throughout history, and then like how we got to where we are today, right? And as a public librarian serving our communities, needing to recognize the complexity of the communities that we serve, have a grounding in cultural literacy, and just focusing on public libraries as a common good and a service for the communities that we serve, like requires a understanding of what those communities are and how they got to be where they are today. So there's 100% working in government. I wouldn't know why the Minnesota State Legislature is set the way it is, or why, our federal government is the way it is without this grounding in my history major. And I wouldn't be able, so I'm also an advocate for public libraries. I'm the legislative chair for the Minnesota Library Association. And I wouldn't be able to effectively advocate if I didn't have an understanding of the people that I'm working with. If I didn't know why Minnesota has a divided legislature, for example, like how are how our communities are, where the cultural understanding is. For sure, it gives me a much better foundation to be able to communicate with everyone that I need to communicate with, whether it's the patron or it's, you know, the director of IMLS and the Institute of Museum and Library Services at the federal government level.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you for your responses. If I may offer a summary comment, I want to just point out that each of our panelists talked about the practical qualities, and it's very common for us to think about it that way. Oh, I got to get a job, which is true. But they also spoke to some other more philosophical or cultural or other aspects that really build upon their first answers about why they were interested in going into history in the first place. So I think they've already, in their first two rounds of responses, they've given us a lot to think about and a lot of potential questions. So by the way, for the students in the room, that's a tip to think about questions. Our last prepared question is pretty open-ended, and I think everyone will be interested in it. The question is simply this: what advice would you give to current history students? And let's mix up the order a little bit and go crazy. Sarah Hawkins, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would say my advice is to take the classes that you love now. It's really both the practical skills that you'll learn in any of the classes that you take in the history major, and the, like Dr. Schroeder mentioned, like the philosophy and just the grounding and loving history that will give you the skills to launch forward. More than making sure you're taking the right classes now. It's, you know, taking the ones that you love, and so that you can be fully invested now is, I think, the best piece of advice that I have for in your current sphere.
Thank you, Sarah. Lucas, let's go with you. What advice would you give?
Yeah, excuse me. So generally just keep studying it. Like I mentioned, and like everyone else has mentioned, it might not seem like it would be on the surface, but those skills that you learn in history classes, they'll bode well in most any career you want to pursue. That kind of leads me to my second point, which is don't freak out if you don't know what you want to do when you're older or when you graduate. Just work hard. Those things usually work themselves out. And finally, be appreciative of those who help you along the way. In particular, Dr. Schroeder and Dr. Nash were helpful to me, and they definitely gave me a big boost and helped get me where I am. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lucas. Thank you for the kind words. We did not plant that. I just want everyone to know it's just part of the job of being a history professor, and each one of us does it in one way or the other. Let's say, Connor, why don't we have you give advice to the assembled students?
Happy to. Well, so the good thing about a history major, especially if you are, so like I came in with AP credits too. I had a lot of room in my schedule. You only need 40 credits to get a history major. Yeah. So I would just suggest, as Sarah mentioned, Sarah, you mentioned this, right? Take other classes, take many other classes that cater to your interests, and even consider going for another minor or another major too as well, because you do have a lot of flexibility. I didn't do that, but I was just interested in all sorts of different subjects. So that worked out well for me. Because I had room, I was able to take environmental science, and I was able to take, Irish literature and other cool classes that definitely broadened my horizon. Ecofeminist philosophy. If it wasn't for that class, I would never have become a Jesuit volunteer probably too as well. So think about, getting an additional major or minor too, because you do have the room, or just consider, how can I broaden my horizon by taking a wide variety of classes? And then I would also say too, when you're looking for a job, here's one bit of advice I recommend to everyone. Start with a staffing and recruiting agency. They are professionals at finding you a job. It is their job, it's no cost to you, and it can really make a huge difference in landing you a position. And then also use the alumni network too, St. John, St. Ben's. You've heard that a million times, but seriously, I can trace my current career back to conversations I had with alum, back to conversations I had with other people in my industry, just because I was willing to reach out. So, yep, make the most of the chance to meet and network other people, even if it's just reaching out to someone on LinkedIn saying, hey, I like your experience. I'm interested in this field, and I'm wondering if you have some time to answer any questions that I might have. And then besides that, I'd say consider doing a year of service after school too. There are a lot of jobs that you'll apply for that say you need X amount of years of experience. Well, if you're a college grad and you have 0 years of experience, that can be a tough one. So consider a program like AmeriCorps or the Jesuit Volunteer Corps or the Benedictine Volunteer Corps, and know that it's a great way to see the world, meet amazing people, be of service, which is one of the best things ever, and then get some really practical, good work experience. And if you're lucky, maybe even get like an education stipend or something like that too. And then I think my final bit of advice is to just believe in yourself. Taking the next steps out of college can be difficult, or even final year in college, the world can seem really overwhelming, but don't count yourself out. Just know that you can scrap, you can work really hard, you have good skills. Like, you'd be surprised at how many people cannot write. Like, that one very practical skill alone does just really set you apart. It's insane. Have patience with yourself. And don't count yourself out too if you hear no, or if you aren't able to achieve some goal you set for yourself. It's not the end of the world. It's not game over. It's just something that's going to keep happening, but you aren't made of glass. You are resilient, and you can do a lot. So that's what I would have to say.
Okay, thank you, Connor.
You're welcome.
And then Sarah Bakken will give you the final word on advice here in the formal structure before we open up for questions.
I mean, other than echoing, I think everybody said some really great things. Lucas, especially, like, what he said, don't worry if you don't know what you're going to do after college, or if your plan doesn't work out. I was, so confident going into college I was going to be a nurse, but I ended up in this way different career path that I really, really enjoy. I also thought that going into library school, I wanted to pursue being an archivist, but then come to find out after I did an internship, I was like, nope, this is not for me. So I would also just say, like, really don't be afraid to try new things that you don't think that you would be interested in. I had a period of time where I worked as a public librarian, and I also, that's also a passion of mine. When I went into grad school after college, I was really hesitant to take this internship because I was so convinced that I wanted to be an archivist, but I found my love for working with adults and adult learners, which is a lot of what I do now. And then, like everyone said, I really want to emphasize you should take the classes you enjoy. College is so short, and your 20s after college will be difficult years. I would say for most people. If they're not, you're really lucky. But you will figure it out. And despite what people say, people with history majors, it's a great thing to major in. Employers really like it. If your parents don't want you to major in history, too bad. Do it if you want to. So that's all I have to say.
Just look up all the famous people with history majors.
Yes.
And then share that with your parents. Like Dennis McDonough, that guy's running the VA right now, all the VAs, and he was a history major at St. John's.
With us.
Yeah,
That's right. Well, I just have two quick follow-ups. One, I wanted to let everyone finish up, but when Connor was talking, I was thinking about reminding folks to take advantage of our XPD office, which houses and facilitates many of the specific things Connor was talking about. And I also want to thank Sarah Bakken for overthrowing parental tyranny when necessary. So I think we have a fair bit of time for questions. So Angie, if you want to, or Jonathan, if you want to get up there to the mic, and we have a little less than 25 minutes for questions. So that's a fair bit, and that's good. So we're ready to field all sorts of questions.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is, you have Dr. Nash here, you have Dr. Schrader there. They want to know so that they can facilitate with their fabulous alums. What do you want to know? Who's my first fabulous question asker? Yes. Yeah, if you want to say it out loud, I'll do my best to paraphrase. So just because everyone can hear with the microphones. Great question. Has the history major ever proven troublesome in your job search? And if so, what did you do to get around it?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, let's, Connor, well, you're on top of my screen here in the Zoom configuration, so why don't you take that one?
I'm happy to. Thank you for the invite. That question really gets me fired up. I'd say if, because you will run into some instances where people are like, what? History major? They just don't know what to make of it, you know, and it depends what industry you're trying to get into, you know, but I mean, for me, you know, trying to get into marketing and advertising, I had people see that on my resume and they're like, wow, he's not a business major, he's not a marketing major. What do we do with him? Don't take that for an answer. You know, like just be able to pitch your skills, know your skills, have a good understanding for them, and then always try and relate your skill set, the more hard skills and then the more nebulous skills back to whatever you're trying to pursue. So, you know, for me, I thought, okay, well, how can the skills I have, you know, be beneficial to this company that I'm applying for? Like, it's really that simple. It's just think about the value that you can provide and then say it with a bit of confidence. Like, you really do have a lot to offer. You know, you understand connections, you understand how to communicate, you understand so much as a history major, and just again, believe in yourself and do not count yourself out.
Thank you, Connor.
Don't let other people, you know, say no to you and then just give up.
Thank you. So I'll just pose the same question if Lucas and Sarah would like to jump in. Have you ever had a situation where your history major seemed to prove troublesome in a job search? And if so, how did you get around that? Lucas, did you have a response to that?
Yeah, and answer is no. If anything, I think it was a benefit. So, and I mean, my career path is, I guess, maybe a little more traditional, like for history majors, at least from like politics and law, you know what I mean? But no, those skills were very useful. And I think they helped get me where I am.
Okay, thank you. Sarah Bakken, would you like to take a crack at that question that kind of rankles us sometimes?
Yeah, I guess I would say similar to Lucas, I can't tell you how many people in library school were also history majors. So for my career path too, it was a pretty common way to go. But I will say not so much in my career, but just talking, I think, which if you have declared a history major and you tell people you're a history major, you know, you get that response. What are you going to do with that? So don't be afraid. I guess just be confident in your skills. And I guess I would have it more in passing with people, or maybe more when I tell them I'm a librarian. I guess I've had that problem. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah Hawkins, do you want to take a crack at that question?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I have the pretty traditional, you know, went right from my history major to library school, and basically library school is, and you can have any undergrad you want, and then whatever direction you go from there, you know, like it probably would be more difficult for me to be a medical librarian at, say, Mayo Clinic or something, for example, without a science background leading into my MLIS. That's not to say it doesn't happen, but I think I would maybe be posed with those questions more frequently if I didn't have such a generalist library perspective that I do have. I would also say, going back to Connor's comment earlier, is don't underestimate the value of what you learn about information and disinformation and misinformation and your ability to evaluate information. And that's also, you know, the librarian in me speaking, but 100% that is one of the strongest suits of your history degree that is relevant across any career field you go into. And it is one of the biggest things facing all industries today is the ability for people to evaluate quality and credible information. So take that skill and run with it.
Amen.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, for defending democracy in a not even thinly veiled way. Angie.
Can I also, I mean, I am not a history major. I am an alumna. I graduated from here with a math degree, so I've been swimming upstream, doing things math majors typically don't do. But I'm kind of queuing off of what all of you said, but especially the two Sarahs. Your major is, I always say on a resume, it's one line on your resume. But what employers are really looking for, or grad programs are really looking for, or volunteer programs are really looking for, what fills up the rest of your resume. And so you heard people really articulate, here's what history is. And so it's that translation. So if there's ever a point where that, you know, Dr. Schroeder would never give an assignment, you know, or Dr. Nash, that wasn't clear, right? But if you're like, why are we doing this again? Again, like it's a connection to what the skills are. It's the critical thinking, it's the problem solving, it's the communication. So of remembering, and if you need to ask, go for it. That's totally fine. You've got amazing professors here. We'll just be like, here's the why of this assignment, because that why then connects to the employers. And to really dig into the question, if you would really ever have an employer say, well, I don't want to hire you because you're a history major, and they wouldn't give, you don't want to work for them. You've just articulated what you have. You've just owned how you're amazing. So that's just kind of a different angle on it. But now I'm going to mute myself.
Yeah, Angie, thank you. And then Angie and Jonathan, do you have another question for us from the room?
Raise your hands. Yes. Yeah, so for Connor or anyone else with a service background, what was the biggest benefit you got out of that?
Wow.
Wow, good question.
Yeah, real hard hitter. You know, I think you just learn a lot about being human. And yeah, I mean, this is, you know, more philosophical, but I think, again, being of service to others is a really wonderful, humbling experience. It's hard to even put that to words for me. And, you know, I was never someone who thought who had any desire to do a year of service, or let alone 2 years of service. But I'm really happy I did, because, you know, again, great job experience. But I also just got to see the world, you know, and there are so many former Jesuit volunteers that I still stay in touch with to this day that are some of my best friends. You know, I just got back from Alaska a few months ago to visit my best friend who lives in Juneau, and some of my other friends up there. But you know, in my case, you are living with other people. I lived with 7 other people in a house in Seattle and 6 other people in Spokane. You learn a lot about how to communicate effectively, how to get along with people, how to let go of things. And that was honestly probably the biggest lesson, is learning to let go. Something bad happens at work, you see something that breaks your heart, something challenging is happening at home. Learn to let it go will save you a lot of suffering and just allow you to really be effective at whatever you do, whether that's being a good partner for someone, a good coworker, or just a good citizen. And then I think just the perspective that it gives you into other people's lives, folks who are facing more challenging circumstances, that's really important too as well. So I would recommend, and again, there's so many opportunities out there that can really kind of get you off to a good start in your professional career. So it's also very practical. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Connor. I just would ask the other panelists, did you have a volunteer experience that you would like to answer in the spirit of the question?
I was going to mention and highlight, while I was a student, do they still do the alternative break experiences through campus ministry?
I think so.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID they did. I think the world is getting figured out, but okay. Pre-COVID they did. Yeah.
So maybe that'll come back around, hopefully. But that's a good way while you are a student to, you know, try it. It's definitely shorter than a year to a service after graduation, but I think that's a great way to, you know, if you've never volunteered or done service like that before, a really good opportunity for you to do that. When I was a student my senior year, I led a trip to Chimbote, Peru. And, you know, I have one of my best friends now because of that trip. So really encourage that. And not necessarily talking about volunteer work, I guess, but I was just thinking about as I was trying to decide what I wanted to do with my career, and Connor was talking of being of service to others, I knew that what I wanted to do with my career, I wanted to help people in some way. So I think I was able to, I think it's important to reflect on kind of what kind of service you want to do. And I really found like my work really fulfilling when I'm able to help a student, or my job is helping people. Whereas maybe like in a more business career path, it's kind of different, I guess I'm trying to say. So I guess if you are someone who thinks you're interested in service, try thinking about how you can put that into your career and make that part of your life kind of permanently. So for example, when I worked in public libraries, that was really impactful with the different communities I got to work with. And I'm sure Sarah can speak to that as well. So.
Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't have a traditional like dedicated year of service, but I would say I view my career as a vocation, right? And I think that I'm serving every day, the communities that we do serve. And also I would say, think about the way like professional organizations and service to your professional association, right? Volunteering for any professional, some industries have really robust professional associations, others don't. But if you're in a career that does, think about how you can give back and further your industry and the communities that you serve through volunteering through your professional association or organization alongside your quote unquote day job.
Thank you, Sarah. Lucas, did you have anything that you wanted to add to the discussion on that topic?
Just briefly, Dr. Schroeder, I provided free defense counsel to indigent clients during a couple semesters of law school. So, but that's nothing really formal.
Okay, thank you very much. Angie, I think we're ready for the next question from the room.
I see you. Yeah. Yep. Can I turn that into an open-ended question? Okay. So at your time at St. Vincent St. John's, what connections opened up your career world? Is that a fair? Yeah. So what connections helped open up your career world?
Okay.
There's some thinking faces.
Yeah. Let's see. Could I just ask for a clarification on behalf of the panelists here? What is meant by connections in this particular context? Are you talking about using services on campus? Are you talking about some other sort of connection to alums, or?
Yeah, do you mean alums, professors, fellow students, resources? Yep. Basically anything, and which of those connections were pivotal or the most helpful as you look back?
Okay, thank you. Lucas, would you take the first crack at that?
Yeah, I mean, our alumni and our network is so big at St. Ben's and St. John's. I run into people every day nearly, or for sure every week. But so a couple examples, I had an internship at the Minnesota Senate during my time at St. John's. A Johnny connection got my foot in the door for that. And the law firm I work at now is filled with Johnnies, and that also kind of gave me a good leg up, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Connor.
I was struggling to find the unmute button.
Well, see, Connor, we didn't, when you were in school, we didn't teach mute, unmute. See,
no, no, I never got those skills, but I got many other skills. So it's all good. You know, I mentioned this already, and Lucas touched on this too as well, but there is a huge alumni network, and I know it's such a buzzword, but it's like cliche and a buzzword for a reason. Don't be one of those people who's afraid to make a connection or reach out to someone just like kind of on a cold call. Like, people who are out there doing what we're doing, working jobs, working in different fields, working as lawyers and librarians and marketing people, like we were in your seat at one point, and we were helped by other people to get to where we are now. We want to give back. Like, that's our way of being of service in a sense too. We want to help you and be of service to you. And generally people like talking about themselves too. It's a thing, you know, so like you're not inconveniencing someone by asking them about themselves and their career. Like, honestly, I mean, I probably have things that I would love to tell you about, like what you can do so I can save you some of the pain maybe that I experienced trying to get established, you know, in my 20s, which is something that Sarah Bakken mentioned could be challenging. She's right about that. You can definitely be a hot mess during those years, but it's also a ton of fun. So don't worry. Seriously though, just be the person who reaches out for an informational interview, to ask questions out of a genuine place of curiosity, not to get a job, but simply with the goal of learning and meeting someone new and maybe challenging yourself to get out of your comfort zone a little bit. And honestly, that could lead to something. You never know. My partner is a Benny, and she did an informational interview 5 years ago after 4 years of service, and it led her to her full-time position. That's been really good for her. And I can honestly trace every move in my career back to an informational interview. Like, that's the power of connection. So please just do it, and you will put yourself ahead of so many other people who are just too afraid to make those connections. You're not going to hear back from everyone, but just go for it. Just cast the net wide and make as many connections as you can, and be genuine about it, and maintain them, and be respectful of people's time and the gifts that they give to as well.
Thank you, Connor.
Yeah,
Just
You're welcome.
Go, Dr. Schroeder. What?
I just want to point out that the students in the 295 know that that we've built in an informational interview into the curriculum for that particular course. I'm just looking at the clock. We have about 5 minutes left, but I want to give Sarah Hawkins and Sarah Bakken a chance to respond to the question about connections that you made or utilized when you were on campus.
I guess I can speak. One thing that hadn't been mentioned yet is I was thinking about getting into grad school, and a lot of people who, if that's something you're considering, you'll probably need letters of recommendation. So definitely impressing your professors, working hard, asking your professors questions, and building that relationship. Don't be afraid to reach. Your professors are your best resource, especially when you're working on your thesis your senior year and that kind of thing. So definitely use them. I know Dr. Schroeder, I think he wrote a recommendation letter for me for grad school. So you don't ever want to, ask someone for a recommendation letter and then say no because they weren't impressed with you. So I just recommend just working really hard and keeping at it. And I thought of one other thing when I answered the question before for giving advice to students that I should mention and emphasize. As you are working on your history papers and all of that, use the library and use the librarians. I can't believe I didn't mention that before, but I just want to emphasize that not only just like going into the physical space, but using the services, using the databases. If you're stuck on a research question, go to a librarian. Their jobs are literally to help you find research. So definitely want to give that a push.
Good point.
Thank you. And then Sarah Hawkins, you have the last word here on the connections.
Yeah, well, I'll just jump in and say Sarah Gawertz, who is still a librarian at St. Ben St. John's, is one of the people that I still have a connection with. I used to babysit her son. She helped me, stay on as support staff after I graduated and work at both Clemens and Alcuin for the year after I graduated while I was in grad school. She's a fantastic librarian. She's still there on campus, and yeah, just utilize that connection, make that connection, tell her I sent you. She 100% is fantastic. I would also just echo, you know, staying close to your professors, building relationships with professors. I still talk to Dr. Jones frequently. We have a relationship. He has similar interests in history that I do. You know, Dr. Atkins actually has stayed connected to me because she has an interest in literature, and I run an indie author contest. So she actually, the reverse, my connection with her has helped me in my career today. She served as a volunteer judge for us in our contest last year. Yeah, just stay close. And then in terms of other connections, this isn't a personal connection, but for your thesis, think about what your topical interest is and what you plan, potentially what you plan to do next, and think about if there's a potential practical way you can tie that into your thesis. So my thesis was on public libraries in Minnesota, and imagine that, I'm working in public libraries in Minnesota. So that was a connection that I built before I even graduated. I'm thinking about thematic connections.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we need to wrap up here in about 2 minutes. I just want to make one observation. This panel obviously has been pitched toward history students, history majors and minors, but the broad ideas that we're talking about are valid across the board. So even if you're in the room and you're not thinking about being a history major, or even if you've been in my class and you've said, I'm never taking another history class, what our alums have been talking about here is really important, and you can just sort of transfer it to another major or minor. So take advantage of not just the history specific information, but also the structural advice that was prepared, that was offered rather. And then in the last minute, we're going to do a lightning round. They had no preparation for this. So in one sentence, I'd like each of our panelists to respond to this idea. Students are going home for Thanksgiving. They're going to be around the table with relatives who say, what the hell are you studying history for? I'd like to have, I'd like a one sentence, snappy but polite response to a potentially skeptical relative. All right, so I'll let you raise your hands when you're ready. We got to do this quick, lightning round. Who's ready? Lucas.
History majors get jobs.
That's very direct. That's a great sentence. There's a subject and a verb and it means something. Okay, who's next? Sarah Hawkins.
I'll go. I think the Minnesota Historical Society says this really well. It's been their theme for a long time. They had the bumper sticker, history matters.
Excellent. All right, Connor, looks like you're unmuted. Go ahead. What do you want to say to the skeptical relative?
Well, I think, oh my gosh, this is tough. How about Sarah Bakken? Do you have an answer?
Mine's gonna sound really lame, but I was gonna say something along the lines of history is actually a really great major, and I'm gonna be great someday. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
that's
gonna
good,
succeed or something. I don't know.
I would say something similar. I'd say, you know, all things in time, Uncle so-and-so or Aunt so-and-so. Just you wait. You know, the possibilities are endless.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're at 56, so we need to let everyone go. So thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you so much for talking to us. Thank you to the students in the room. And then thank you to the folks at XPD for organizing all of this. And we will we'll call it a day. Well, we'll call it a panel. We have other things to do. Go to your next class. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Make sure you signed in. And panelists, thank you distinctly. It was lovely to meet all of you. I did connect with all of you on LinkedIn. So truly, thank you.
You're
and thank
welcome.
you, Dr. Schroeder, and thank you, Dr. Nash. I appreciate you bringing classes too.
Thank
It was a
you.
pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Go set